Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Thanks to Chosen Foods for supporting the Ignited podcast. Chosen Foods is a health food company with a focus on real, nourishing food. They offer a variety of healthy fats, plant-based proteins, and ancient superfoods.
You know, I love that. I love Chosen Foods because of their 100% pure coconut oil spray. It's so versatile. I can add it to sauteed veggies, to my scrambled eggs, or anything else. They have no harmful propellants or emulsifiers. They're making healthy cooking and eating an absolute breeze, which is exactly what I need with 3 kids and a husband who barely cooks. Okay, breakfast and maybe one other meal a week.
Thank you for that. All you got to do to get our special discount is head to chosenfoods.com/IGNTD Ignited and use the promo code Ignited50 during checkout for 50% off your order, people.
That is a lot of discount for some amazing, amazing oils.
Get some Chosen Foods. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited podcast. I am Adi Jaffe.
And I am Sophie Jaffe.
And I'm scared.
Yeah, I'm pretty shaken up right now.
Yeah, I mean, like, literally blood pressure is probably about 20 points higher than normal.
Yeah, I would say probably don't listen to, well, really any of our episodes with kids in the car.
I know you say that every time we talk about this, but this one is like for real.
Yeah, this was an
episode that
you probably don't even want to be driving because it's going to upset you if you have children. Although I think the rest of the universe is pretty aware of these things. I'm just the one that lives inside like a box of some sort and doesn't allow anything to penetrate. That's negative.
Babe, don't tell people that I put you in a box. I don't think that's legit. So we have Dr. Lisa Strohman on today, and she is an expert in all things evil. I think we can say that. Like, given the work she's done.
Yeah, I mean, she's incredible. She's gone through a lot of stuff, and I can't wait for you to hear her story. But most importantly, just to become more educated. After you listen to this, you're going to feel much more educated, more of an understanding when more informed when it comes to your own children. If you're working with children, maybe you're a teacher, and more importantly, just yourself when it comes to the cyber world.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of us live in pretty safe little cocoons, I think, most of the time. But we struggle with social media and with media in general with the kids. Yes, they go to a Waldorf school, technology. Yeah. They want iPad, they want phone, they want those videos, they want things all the time.
Just like they want sugar and like it's a drug like anything else. She made it very clear. If you watch her TED Talk, which we will have in the show notes, she talks about how addiction to technology is on par with that of meth.
Yeah, and the reaction that your brain has to the dopamine release and all, these companies design this stuff purposefully to be addictive. I mean, like on my phone, I've now set up the thing where my side button turns off color on my phone. And the reason is I was reading and they make those super bright, crazy colors purposefully so your brain just wants another hit.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people doing phone cleanses, and maybe it's not 7 days without being on your phone, but it's different practices like deleting apps you don't use, turning off notifications for 1 day, making your phone all black and white for 1 day. There's all these different, going off social media for a day. These are all ways to kind of cleanse your mind and get out of that junky space of it just being addicted and being so dependent on our phones.
Oh my God, now that you just said that, I was just thinking, I flip through my phone to get to the apps that I use. But I go through all the apps I haven't touched in like a year and a half.
Yeah, get rid of them.
2 years.
Get rid of them.
And I just keep scrolling through them, even though I literally have never touched them. It's like that thing in your closet where
you don't wear it.
You have those shirts and those pants. You haven't worn them in 17 years, but they still hang.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we talk a lot about the influence of social media and technology in general in this talk, but then a lot about kids. And, again, our kids go to Waldorf. They don't really get any technology almost
Yeah,
at all during the week.
we're gonna actually have one of our favorite teachers from the Waldorf school on this podcast because we've gotten so many questions about it, and he will
Mr.
explain
C.
it. Mr. Castillo, Mr. C. He will explain it better than anyone else possibly could. It's a magical school system, so highly recommend just checking it out and seeing if it's a good fit for you and your family. But one of the things that was really hard for us was transitioning into zero technology. The summer before they went, we completely detoxed them for 3.5 weeks, zero technology. Thank goodness we lived in the valley and we had a pool for distraction, healthy distraction. But after that little detox, they went into school and we started implementing no screen time at all, no technology during the week. And then on the weekends, very controlled.
Yeah, they probably get like an hour, maybe hour and a half.
Yeah, depending on the day.
Those days.
Sometimes it's none, sometimes it's some.
And so that, that's really powerful. And I think that's helped us. I mean, I couldn't imagine. Well, I could
Thank
imagine.
goodness we have that as a boundary, you know?
I could imagine, right? Like it would make our life easier many, many times to just put them in front of a movie and just go, you and I hang out and have dinner together for crying out loud.
Totally.
But it would destroy their being and would just, I see
the
them
short term versus the long term is not worth it.
Yeah, you see it when they get pulled out of the technology, they're like, give me my drug
like
back.
a drug.
It's
exactly.
Crazy. It's
yeah.
really, really crazy.
Yeah. So we've found, now on the other side of it, I think even a couple years ago, I would have been more defendant on like, it's okay, just let them. Like for me, it was like, I watched Kai. He's so on all the time cerebrally. Like he's just intellectually always connected and clicked in. It's exhausting. I'm exhausted. He's like you. He's always on. So I think sometimes it's not like, I still think this way, but I really thought then like just watching my child, like sometimes he needs to just chill out and numb out. And that's how I felt. But what I didn't know is at that point, developmentally is the worst time to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
So now I know with Noah, we were better with Leo. Leo wasn't even into TV for like a really long time. I kept trying to get him to watch a movie and he would not sit still because it's not his personality. But now I know. And I hope that after this and listening to this, if you're going to have kids or if you do, you just delay how much TV and how much screen time and monitor what kinds they're having. And most importantly, if they have screen time, you're engaging with them.
Yeah.
That was the takeaway for me.
Yeah. And, obviously there's also the more, how do I say this? Kind of like the more unsavory part of this conversation, right? The stuff that you and I totally stay away from, like kids being followed because their location is known online and that kind of stuff, which look,
it can be unsafe.
It's just important to know, right?
Yeah.
We've come to a place where we trust so much. You've done this for me more than probably anything else in my past, but we also do need to acknowledge, I believe in the inherent good in people, and yet there are people, and you can talk about whether
Outliers.
it's their biology or their trauma or their current circumstances that make it such that they are looking to hurt, abduct, steal, collect money, however you want to look at it, and take advantage of people who are vulnerable.
Exactly.
And you can't live your life constantly worried about that because then you don't get to enjoy your day to day, but you should still be aware.
Yeah, that's why I'm grateful, is because I usually do kind of put my earmuffs on and don't listen to those things because I don't want the negativity to enter my body. However, it's important to be informed, and I'm actually not going to be putting like where I am in the moment anymore. When I'm with my kids, if I'm on my own and it feels safe and like I'm just hanging out in a public environment, whatever.
Yeah.
But for me personally, when I'm around the kids, I'm just not going to be doing things in real time anymore because it's not worth the risk and it's no big deal. I can just post later.
Do it 30 minutes
Save it
after
to
you
my
left the
phone
place.
and then post it later. Yeah.
Totally. I think that's powerful. And again, right, tiny little things, just like, it's so funny to think about, but it's almost like I adjusted my diet in some really subtle ways initially when we met, just by little switches.
Yeah.
So it's not like I didn't get to eat the foods I wanted to, but I would switch them or change the way we made them so that they were a little bit healthier.
Exactly.
And this is, to me, the same thing, is
Yeah.
how can you be aware, live in a world so that you're increasing your safety without compromising your enjoyment of life. And so, such a cool thing, because you and I have talked about the use of technology as a way of just sucking out their brain power.
Yeah.
And that is important and that is useful. But we talked about a lot of other really interesting elements of that discussion that haven't been there before. And so I think for me, maybe as kind of a tip, as a takeaway for a lot of people from this is, I think so many of us shy away from having the uncomfortable conversations. And with kids with kids and your partner, it's absolutely one of the times that can happen, right? Like if you view technology use differently, or you really want that dinner with your partner, and you know the TV might not be great for them, but you want to sit them in front of it. I just urge people to have the explicit conversation. Like sit down with your partner and have an honest conversation. Hey, this is how I see things. This is how I'd like for things to happen. Sometimes I get lazy about it or whatever, but I want us to collaborate.
And we're not perfect. That's the thing. We're not perfect. Like I can promise you, I have 3 children, including a little baby girl. There is going to be a time in the foreseeable future where I put them in front of TV specifically so that I can breathe.
Sure.
And I will be very careful about what we pick. We usually gravitate towards PBS Kids, things that are like really loving or can teach them something or good for their brains. But I'm going to do it. And it's going to be as a pacifier so that I can chill out. And that is best for me in that moment. Sure. It's best for them in that moment because they don't want to see mommy sleep deprived, alone. When you're out of town, I'm with all 3 or whatever it is. And I think that's important to note is that we're not perfect. This is not to say burn your iPads, burn your phone. Do not let your children catch view of your phone. That's not what we're saying here.
Sure.
Just be more aware of the consequences, be more aware of the developmental times in their life, like when they are 3, when they are like early teens. Don't let them sit all day long playing video games. It's just be more aware that there are secret things that are happening that are not as transparent. They're not just on Snapchat.
I know.
They're not even that is something that they should necessarily be on at all, but they're not just doing something innocent necessarily. And the people making these programs are deliberately making it so that there are these backdoors and there are these secret things and are making it more addictive. I'm really interested in getting an ad blocker for our iPad because they're every other second is an ad and it makes them even more ADD. Never mind they're playing these games that make them more ADD. Now on top of it, there's an ad that pops up, not joking, every 9 seconds. No way. That's horrible for them. So I'm going to do that immediately.
Yeah. And I wonder how you feel about this, given the fact that, as we talked about before, like when you were growing up, you had free access to any TV you wanted. Like the TV was on all the time. We
had every device, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, PlayStation 2, you name it.
Really? You had all of them together?
All of them.
That's amazing.
In different areas of our house. We would go down into the basement and play for hours. On the weekends, I don't even know, yes, we played outside a lot, but there was no limit.
Yeah.
To TV. There was no limit to movies. There was no boundaries,
And we talked about it before that your mom, especially after the divorce, absolutely used it as a babysitter.
Yeah, she worked 2 jobs. She was like, I got to get my stuff done. I'm studying for school.
Totally.
So, I mean, obviously I turned out perfectly.
Yeah,
obviously. That's kind of like the fine.
So maybe that's how to do it, actually.
Yeah.
Let your kids watch Real Sex on HBO from like 5 years old.
No. Come on, 8.
I mean, that gets me to this other, because you talked about watching pretty much everything on HBO when you were a kid. And I didn't get exposure to that stuff until later. But she talked about that too, like how kids are getting exposed to porn, like in Minecraft and in these other chats.
In searching for a book report.
Where porn sites literally target.
It's so sick.
Those
It's
searches.
so sick. Okay, we're gonna hear it all right now. So stay tuned, and we're gonna bring it to you.
Yeah,
Are you ready? Truth. You ready? Raise your hand.
A little aside. If you haven't signed up ever in a little while, and you are having these kind of difficult discussions, we've got that really amazing couples workshop that we put online.
Yes.
We'll put a note for it here in the show notes. I don't care if it's 2:00 in the morning and you guys are fighting. This workshop can help put a little barrier for you to give you a little space and improve your communication. And if you're not in a relationship, it still can help you a lot.
Yeah, it's a 3-hour workshop with a D&I, super affordable. So go check it out.
Yeah, check it out. See you on the other side.
Bye. This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fix all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this portion of the Ignited podcast, our conversation. And man, maybe those getting personal conversations get pretty important for people to listen to. But I think the one we're going to have right now is massively important. For those of you who already have kids, those of you who are planning to have kids, those of you who've ever seen kids, those of you who know what kids are like, I feel like the stuff that Dr. Lisa Strohman is going to teach us right now is going to be hugely powerful. Dr. Strohman, I know you, first of all, is Lisa okay for this?
Lisa's fine. Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
And as we talk about this, I want to keep in mind all the different things that are going to impact our listeners. But, we got introduced because one of the things you talk about is technology addiction. That's kind of one of the places, at least, where our specialties meet. But you really focus a lot on kids and the impact of technology on kids. You were just talking about a talk you gave to parents the other day. So before we introduce what it is exactly you do and all the topics we want to talk about, tell us a little bit of how you got into this area, your own experience raising your kids and kind of what you've encountered and how this specialty came about for you.
And welcome, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
He gets right into it.
Right into it. We're going to get right into it.
Yeah.
So I think it wasn't probably a very traditional way I got into this. I went to a JD PhD program, so law psychology, and was very fortunate when I was in that program. I applied for an internship with the FBI and was accepted to become an honors intern with them. And in '98, and worked in the CASCU unit, which is Child Abduction Serial Killer Unit, which is the top profiling minds of the world. So. Yeah, so I did homicidal pedophilia for that year. I started having night terrors. I would come home. My husband was like, he's like, he'd sit up in bed and stare at me. He's like, thank God we don't have a gun next to our bed. It really impacted me in terms of the evil that's out there. And this was back in '98, before technology really, really took off the way it is now. I stayed on with the Bureau. The director at the time was Louis Free, and he asked me to do something a little less painful for me, which is abduction work. And Can I just
pause for a moment and say that how traumatic was your first year there if abduction work is the less painful part of it? I can't when I hear some of the stories that you hear, I just get them through the news. I don't have the behind the scenes look at the actual intermediate facts.
Right.
You said the evil that exists in the world. We kind of live in a bubble and we're protected from most of that most of the time. And that sounds like a blessing from where you've been.
It is. And I think that, and I say that lightly. Obviously if I get into that, it is extremely traumatic. The minds that work in that field are incredible. And literally I was, a grad student. There was a lot of women being abducted in their 9th and 10th month of pregnancy right before delivery. And Director Free was saying, this needs to stop. And it doesn't matter. We had from 0 to 1 years of age, we had about 20 cases per year in the United States that was happening. And he said, one's too many. And so I think that I didn't have kids for 16 years, I'll tell you that. My husband and I were terrified about...
I would have to move to the moon to have kids after that.
Yeah, and I was the most paranoid pregnant woman in the hospital that you've ever seen. And just making sure who was coming in. But so that's how I got into the forensics and was in that field. And I was there as doing my dissertation work when Columbine happened.
Wow.
And so, sadly, right, I'm in this unit. One of my mentors and very good friends still today was Jean Regala, who was a special agent who was the lead on Columbine. And that was a terrifying issue that I have to say was just seeing what we did in the profiling unit on Klebold and Harris and putting them up and digesting everything that at that time in 99 they had put online was incredible. For a year prior, and nobody really knew before the amount of information. So that's how I got into this field. It wasn't pretty. It was hard, and it was terrifying.
Yeah, and I think maybe, I don't actually want to speak to it. I think you'll be able to speak to it. Some of our listeners are probably right on the cusp of even knowing and
what
being
that was
cognizant when Columbine was around. Can you talk? Obviously the first publicly acknowledged mass shooting in a school in this country that just really drove the awareness of what mass shootings are.
And what year was that? Sorry.
In 99.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the impact that had?
Sure. I think that it was certainly from a law enforcement perspective, it was the first organized, very well played out attack on a school grounds that was publicized at the level it was, again, because of media.
Yeah.
There had been other shootings, even back if you go into the 70s, there are shootings that have occurred, but not on a level where you have such direction and focus. And unfortunately, one of the individuals was very, very mentally ill and sociopathic, and had somebody who was quote unquote a friend who kind of got put under his wing. But that laid the ground for Sandy Hook and Parkland and all of these other shootings that your listeners will definitely know about. And that's my frustration, right? It's been 2 decades literally since Columbine has happened, and we're no better off than we were then. And I think that my opinion obviously is that we're responding to the issues that aren't as important as the psychology and the mental health and the issues that these kids are struggling with.
Yeah.
Because we'll put $1.8 million into a school for security cameras, but we're not going to spend $100,000 on a counselor. And that's just ridiculous.
Or $500,000 on 5 counselors because there are 2,000 kids in that school.
Right.
And one counselor will simply not be able to handle. I think so many people forget what growing up is like and how difficult and just challenging every day can be sometimes as you walk into this. You're learning to be an adult, quote unquote, but entering that whole world of individualization and picking who I want to be and making these choices that are, that can have an impact for the rest of your life, but you never really had to deal with before junior high. And it's almost like adults forget that and then just assume that kids are adults and should behave like them. And so I think that's why this conversation is so important. If you don't pay attention, I think a lot of what I'm hearing and what you're saying is if we don't pay attention and pay attention in the right way, pay attention in a way that is appropriate to the children that we're dealing with, then we're essentially turning a blind eye to what is going to end up coming down the pike. It's going to be here. And it is crazy to think that it's been 20 years since that shooting, because I remember the day that happened and the publication of it and just the images that were coming in back then, and nobody had ever seen anything like that.
Right. And now we all see it. And so when you went to your point of kids having to grow up so early, you see, primary, secondary, and tertiary traumas happening. Primary are the kids on the ground, secondary, right, or the ancillary people, and tertiary those are the kids that are watching it online through social media. And so those traumas that occur and that infiltrates their mind and their thinking and how they're interacting and how they trust the world. And when I was a kid, you had attachment, right? You had teachers that you could trust and talk to, and you had people that looked you in the eye and you had conversations with. And these kids are all technologically connected, but they're not attached. Yeah. And there's a difference, in my opinion, from, the decade of practice I've been doing with these kids.
Wow. Okay. So, I think that's a great intro to why this topic is important and crucial. We're sitting here with Noah, who's a almost 3-month-old. I keep getting stuck on this abduction thing that you did for a while, and that's how scary that just the notion that can even happen would be to a parent. And so you did this abduction work, you got involved. It sounds like a lot of what you had done, whether it was directly meant to from the beginning or not, touched on children and the impact that they go through from the pedophilia and that work to abduction, etc. How did your awareness of the technology piece and your focus on really making that the place where we're going to create the impact, how did that happen for you?
I think that, so based on being in Quantico when Columbine happened and going to headquarters in DC and being able to see the Internet Crimes Unit at the federal level, and how busy they were even back then, really kind of sat with me and until I went into private practice. And as I was in private practice and as technology became more and more, I guess, accessible to kids ubiquitously, like every kid had a technology device, I started seeing marriages fall apart, right? I mean, this isn't just a kid issue, but it really started to impact in the practice. And I started seeing that this isn't really about humans disconnecting. It has to do with how technology is creating fractures in where we are. And that's how I got into it, is from the beginning to where we were then.
I love it. I mean, and let's make sure that we touch, because I know we talked about some of the topics we want to get to, but obviously in the context of what we do here, talking about how this can impact relationships and marriages and getting parents on the same page around these topics can be so important, right? Because all parents want their children's well-being to be a primary topic, but we don't always agree necessarily on what that looks like. And to me, that's where these educational sort of episodes come in, is let's get the information out there. Let's understand what's really happening. And then people can have their own discussions in terms of how they want that to parlay into their own child rearing experiences, but at least have the information, right? You can't, if you just turn a blind eye and pretend like something's not happening, that's not effective parenting. That's just ignoring the facts.
Right. And I think that we fall prey to the amount of connection that we can have online. And so, I mean, I've had cases where people are getting into cars, they're in not their car, and all of a sudden the Bluetooth takes over and a text message like starts to play out loud, and then the marriage is over, right? Because they thought that was a secret text message that was coming across from some paramour that they may have met at whatever it was. And it's, and it's, to your point, it's what we do online and offline matter. We're the same person. Yeah. And I think that we're forgetting that. I really do. As humans, what we do always matters, and it's character, right? That what we do when people aren't looking, which matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is something that definitely is prevalent in my world. And just, I just noticed so strongly with the world of social media, like how even just what you see, not even what you engage in, but just what you see, how it affects your energy, how it affects your mood. I mean, it can set me back just by going down the rabbit hole of just seeing things, just images, and just how much it can affect you, never mind engaging with things and allowing it to penetrate. I mean, I've had social media enter into my dreams, images that I see or conversations I've had online with people I don't even know in the flesh come into my dreams that evening. Like, it's crazy how powerful it is. And I think that bringing awareness to this issue is so important because of how prevalent social media is, especially for our children. Like, we think we're like addicted to social media. We don't even know.
Yeah, because we didn't grow up attached to it from the beginning. And in the United States, we have most children are getting their first device at the age of 4.
Oh,
and so
we just had
crazy.
This discussion. We just had this discussion because let's just say some families around us, their kids are getting iPhones at like the age of 6 and 7. And I'm not even talking about a device, like full on an iPhone, like a functioning iPhone. Like they have Snapchat accounts. They're 7 years old. There's no way in hell that's happening to our kids, first of all. But again, maybe more importantly, let's just start there. Okay, let's just start there. Okay, so we see this prevalence. We understand that this stuff is happening. Let's talk about evidence-based. I'm always big on the evidence-based. Let's talk in terms of evidence-based. What are the trends? What are the things people should be aware of? What do we know? Like, I know, for instance, for marijuana and alcohol use, we know that the further out you delay it, so the later the age of onset, essentially, the greater the reductions in cognitive impact and school performance, et cetera, et cetera. What are we seeing with technology around that?
you have an identical like a curve, and there's 2 decades worth of data. And I don't know whether or not you were able to see the TED talk I did, but I go through the science in it, and it shows the meth, it shows a healthy brain, it shows a technology related brain on an fMRI. So I think that people really need to understand that it is the identical to that addiction process. And the younger the kids are, where their brains are fully in this process of development, right? So you have the neuronal burst at 3 and you have another one at puberty. Those are really super critical periods. And that's when we're giving them the devices and giving them access to technology.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't, people have this really, I think a lot of people misconceive what actually happens with the brain. I think maybe this is an important conversation to have, right? So kids are born with developing brains, and then their brain is constantly creating new neurons, like actually new neuronal cells.
Connections.
Well, the connections will then be created with those new cells. And so as you mentioned, right around 3 years, you get this huge burst. That's why cognitive ability, language, all those things develop so critically right around that time. And then around puberty, you get this last push of actual new neurons. And then after that ends, like post-puberty, all your brain actually does is clean itself up. It
prunes it. Yeah.
This process called pruning, exactly. And it makes itself more efficient. It says, okay, well, we've created all the neurons we're going to create. Now let's kill some off, the ones who are not engaged appropriately. They haven't created really strong connections in any network that are important. And the reason is those things take a lot of energy, right? Yeah. About 20% of your metabolic energy is spent in the brain, for those of you who don't know that. So we want to prune. We want to make it as efficient as we possibly can. So the brain does that. And I think the point you just made, Lisa, that is so important is think of what then happens around those time periods and understand that whatever happens during that period, like, 13 to 17 or so, right? That's about kind of the roughly the range we're talking about. That's going to have nearly unchangeable, long-lasting effect on the brain. And I say nearly unchangeable because in reality, your brain keeps creating new connections. So the whole idea of neuroplasticity, that keeps happening until you die. But no new neurons are created. And so if we create a huge emphasis on specific networks in the brain during those time periods, it's going to be extra hard to undo that work. It's going to be extra hard to stay away from that. And you talked about the parallel. Obviously that has to do with dopaminergic reward, and people kind of every time that you click these devices and these apps are kind of made to be addictive. They're made to...
Not kind of, they are.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Totally. So do you want to talk a little bit about what impact that has on puberty period brains?
Yeah, the obvious ones are, with social media, the likes, the affirmation that they're getting, that external extrinsic reward that they start to become reliant and dependent on, again, becomes kind of intrinsic in them, that the only thing that is feeling rewarding to them is that external reward. There is not one thing I've put online that I've ever gone back and looked at the comments on, specifically on purpose, because I know what I put out is what I authentically believe, and I feel confident and I feel comfortable, and it's something I'm proud of, right? You're not going to do that when you're a teenager, right? You're just putting stuff out there because you want to be relevant, and you want to find out if anybody believes in you or accepts you or any of those things. So that's one thing, that external extrinsic reward that they start to become reliant on, which think about, like, now they're going into the workforce, right? And now they're in their 20s and they're in college, and they constantly are needing that affirmation, and they're not feeling like self-sufficient or internally competent because of how they were kind of developed during those periods.
It's also during those formative years of like 13 to 18, it's actually not a real, it feels like a real sense of affirmation, but it's not. So during those years, that's when those are your formative years. You're going to like high school, you're going to middle school, your response to people, your reactions to people, that's what forms who you are and the type of person you are. And if you're getting kind of arbitrary, or like, they're just not real. It's not a real engaging relationship. So you're basing your own self-worth based on someone that's in a virtual world who you may or may not know in the flesh, but for the most part, it's someone in the virtual world that's now affecting your worth as a human. And it's during those years where, like, that's when it matters most. That's when these relationships and this bonding and
your response to the world outside of you really matters. And if I can't even imagine if in middle school and high school, it was hard enough to get approval in middle school and high school, and you kind of navigate that, but at least you have something to kind of latch onto because it's reality. But
now it's superficial, and there's filters, and there's right. So there's no authenticity in what you're doing.
And there's the anonymity of being behind the screen. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because the psychology of that is huge. Of the things that people are willing to say to others when there's a distance of a screen between them.
Totally.
I mean, there's been so much research on that. I mean, it would be huge to talk about here. But can you talk a little bit about what you've seen for kids around that?
Well, I think that it's interesting. I think that there's, if I look at my kind of millennial group, the 20 to early 30-year-old kind of people, they deal with it much differently than the younger kids that are coming up, right? So, and this is just clinically, like the millennial kind of group has figured out that there is that quote unquote delay because they're past those kind of formidable years, in that somebody on the other end may not be who they say they are, and they may be just antagonizing, right? All the fake news stories and all of the trolling and all of that stuff. And they start to get a handle on it. The younger kids have absolutely no idea. They still believe that those are real, authentic, meaningful exchanges with people. And that's what's so detrimental and damaging, I believe.
Yeah. And look, we see it with our own kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a really hard time telling apart fantasy from reality, period. And so when somebody bullies them online, who they've never met, and that hasn't happened with our kids yet, but I can just imagine when they get a comment, they just take it at face value. Right.
And that's, kids are mean, right? They don't have filters, and and it's not, they don't respect each other's emotional needs. And I think that a lot of it's developmental, a lot of it's just mean kids and feeling poor about themselves. Right. Totally narcissistic. That whole imaginary audience that I would say probably, 30 years ago in psychology, we talk about how when kids go to school, if you got a pimple on your face or your clothes didn't fit right, you think everybody's staring at you.
Sure.
And all the other kids are staring at themselves in the mirror too, right? So nobody really is paying attention, but we feel that imaginary audience. Now interlace that into technology and put yourself online in social media on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, and assume that everybody's paying attention to every single thing you do. That's their nightmare.
Like if you have a picture with a pimple, normally in school, that pimple is gone in 4 days and you can feel like a normal human being again.
Right.
You had bad acne. I remember that. Like there's that's ridiculous. But now that picture is there forever. So if you leave it, people can comment on it for months. And if you take it down, then people will probably speak badly about you because you took it down. It's almost like you lose either way. And
lose either way.
That's got to be really, really scary. Okay. So I got to admit, I'm going to call myself out here for a second. So we have two boys, 6 and 8. And now we have Noah, our first little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, I'm going to admit this just because this whole podcast is about being transparent. But I have new fears now that I have a daughter that I never had when there were two boys. And that's obviously my judgment and my stereotypes of women versus men and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things is around technology. And obviously there's this whole world of either hidden apps, sexting, all that stuff. Now she's 3 months old. I'm worrying about this about 11 to 12 years too early.
You'll be ready though.
But maybe not 11 or 12 years, maybe 8 years. Look at the way that everyone, even women are going through puberty at younger ages. Our neighbor got a cell phone at 6 years old. What will happen when she's 6 years old? Things are just happening so quickly.
She's going to be living in a single room upstairs and everybody
locked away.
There will be screamed.
Borderline abuse.
We'll have this. This is a conversation for a different episode. But so I know one of the things that you learn a lot about and you educate yourself so you can educate others is about the actual behaviors the kids then engage in, the specific apps they're using. I know that this exists, but I don't know the apps. Like they'll have games that seem like they're just games, but actually the whole point is to enter backdoors for chats that their parents can't find, etc.
Oh my God.
It's
terrifying.
I don't know if you want to be here for this conversation.
Yeah, I might need to leave.
It's really, really
I'm
scary.
like so naive to all this stuff.
But no, Lisa, tell us about that. Like, this is the important stuff.
So, I had some parents last night, but Minecraft and Roblox, like particularly for boys, really love those. They're like building games and things like that. And parents last night were talking about, I had no idea that they could actually chat outside of that. And I said, well, how many of you have come across like Roblox porn or Minecraft porn? And all these parents, like, brains exploded. And I was like, oh yeah, it exists. And I could send you photos of, I actually pulled it up for the parents, of where people go in and they create like literally kind of caricature porn for other kids. They'll attack your child's character, and assault them. And again, to me, it's like this effort of kind of normalizing and creating and grooming and all of that stuff that, of course, I'm, damaged for life, having worked at the FBI and like know what these people are doing. Totally. But again, it's like, YouTube is like another one that I think that parents really need to pay attention to, that if you go onto Minecraft and videos on how to do it better. And I had a parent, she's like, well, it's a PG account. It's another kid. And he talks about how to build things. And I watched a couple with him. And in my head, I'm thinking, if your son makes one comment or says thanks, that IP address is public because it's on a public forum. And now anybody, if I'm a pedophile and I'm going in and I'm trying to find young boys or young girls, I'm going to go to those apps, makeup apps, Minecraft apps, Roblox, Fortnite. I'm going to go on there and I'm going to look for kids that are posting on there that look vulnerable. And I'm going to create a friendship and I'm going to go after them. And I can find out where they are because lots of them post pictures of themselves, which has meta tag data on there. Like, even if they put up their profile shot and they haven't scrubbed the meta tag data off of it, you can go in and you can look at the longitude and latitude of where that photo was taken. So that's the real truth that I scare parents about how scary it is.
My heart is beating faster already. And you know what I really want to make sure that we get for our people is, I'm sure you have tips somewhere on how, people can look up how to clear that metadata somehow.
Right.
So you put that somewhere as well.
I blog about it. Right.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll have a link for people to look at that stuff because, this is like hygiene, right? It's just like stuff you learn to do it. Once you learn how to do it this way, you just start posting pictures in that way instead of being more public about it. Look, we're pretty public in general, which is actually scary.
I actually do think about this a lot. I don't even, relative to huge people that have platforms on social media and online, I'm not even, there. I have like over 100,000, but like, think about 100,000 people having their eyes on you, never mind the public people that, because it's a public profile, the people that have access to what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, where I'm doing it. I've had people, in all parts of the world where I am, come up to me and coincidentally know like the hotel I'm staying at and, where I ate my meal. And I'm very public about it, but there's a part of me now, and I want to get your opinion on this as an expert. There's a part of me now that like wants to kind of delay posting of like locations of where I am until, especially when I'm with my kids, like in Israel, which is like the literal other side of the world. I had 5 people come up to me and recognize me from my social media. And it's a little scary because you know what? They know where I'm staying. Like, I just posted a story 10 minutes before that in my hotel elevator. And I'm wondering, as someone who is so trusting, but also wants to be safe for my children and for myself, like what are your thoughts on that? Should I like delay that? Should I maybe not do geotagging until I've left that place? Like, what are your thoughts?
I would 100% say delay, and I think it's sad the world that we live in. But if you look at 4 people in a crowd, one of them has some sort of probably mental illness challenge that they're struggling with. It could be something as simple as anxiety or depression, or it could be something like sociopath, psychopathy, like that they, and you just don't know. And so particularly, as a parent also, I absolutely would never like geotag anywhere I am with my kids. I don't, there's no reason you can't do a delay, right? So excited to update everyone. When I was in Israel, here's what we went on, and then do a story on it when you're gone, right? And that's what I recommend. I tell my kids, all of my teens that I talk to in schools that I go and talk to, there's no reason for the live stream. Right? When Periscope came out, I was like, this is terrible. And now we've got really live streaming platforms that kids are using that that are just, to me, like fundamentally dangerous. So again, like that's part of your brand. It's part of what you need to do, but there's no reason why you couldn't delay it, is my opinion.
Okay.
And is there, because what I heard part of the question, Soph, is, when you're traveling, probably even more important because
your home's vulnerable now.
You don't even. Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Back home, right?
Think about that.
Yeah, Lisa's going to freak us out today. Cool.
No, this is a good reality check for me because I'm overly trusting. Like I'm the type of person that, hopefully there's no psychos listening right now, but I like leave my car unlocked all the time, no matter where I go. Like, if it were up to me, my front door would be open all the time. Like I'm just like, it's the energy you put out there, but I also am an intelligent human being. And I know that it's not that simple. And, there are some things that you just can't control, even from your energy.
Well, I'm sure a lot of these parents were trusting until their kid got abducted.
Right.
And then the world collapses and you live in a different universe. You literally, like, your entire reality has just shifted and it will never be the same. And you obviously saw hundreds of cases like that.
Right. Right.
Okay. So there are these apps. You talked about some of the really, really common. I mean, everybody's heard Fortnite. What the fuck? I don't. Yeah. I know I'm 42 years old. I'm dating myself like, whoa, but holy shit. This Fortnite thing is like a storm.
It's so unfair because the industry has so many addictive properties at its fingertips. I mean, there was a huge letter to the APA. I don't know if you saw it or not, but they were talking about these behavioral psychologists that are getting hired. I mean, they're making 4 times what I can make, to go in with these gaming companies and say, here's how you create more addictive apps.
I got approached by a company. This is about 10 years ago, but I was still in grad school. And they did online gambling, like bingo, like stuff you would never think makes money, but it makes hundreds of millions of dollars for them. And they were willing to hire me. And at the time it was a real conundrum for me. Like, I study addiction, so I know exactly what you need, but fuck, like, am I really going to sell out like that? And I ended up not doing it. And it's fine. I mean, again, we live in a world based on money. So there were definitely times in my life where I was like, I could have used the money, but at the same time, it can create lifelong problems for these people. And that's a huge issue to understand.
Right. And I think that the public doesn't recognize the level of how much they put into it. And I think that if you do like a Google Scholar alert, even like for the listeners, and you type in, technology or internet addiction, and you look back there's literally 18, 19 years of research that shows the massive amounts of information and data we have collected that we know that this is happening. Yeah. And it's just hidden. We don't put it in the press. We don't talk about it.
Well, my question, I know the DSM's pretty delayed. I was a psych major also, so I know a little bit about, the DSM and the regulations and how like slow it kind of is and delayed. But do you think like what long-term, diseases, mental, any kind of effects do you think are going to happen in the next like 5 years, 10 years based on the addiction to social media, the addiction to technology? Like, I already see it. I mean, I kind of see it happening already. I'm just wondering from your expertise, what are your thoughts?
I think that if we're going to go through like what the DSM already has, right? You have like attachment disorder for sure is blooming already with younger kids and populations. Depression and anxiety are the highest rates ever. The CDC, Dr. James Mercy, I've worked with over there, from 2006 to 2016, we have a 200% increase in suicide for girls aged 10 to 14 and a 50% increase in boys of the same age, 10 to 14. So the psychology and the hopelessness and helplessness in trying to put a diagnostic label on it is harder because it doesn't fit the traditional depression or anxiety. I think that the attachment disorder, I think that the process addiction piece that you're talking about with the DSM being so delayed because of the political arguments and, some people want it as gaming disorder, some people want it as internet addiction. I look at it, and my book that I'm working on right now is Technology, the New Gateway Drug. I think technology is just a gateway into all of these other areas. And technology itself isn't the evil. It's the things that it puts us into. And those things are what's creating the psychological damage. But
I agree.
that's my opinion.
Yeah. When people ask me about internet addiction, I say that most of the time, the people that I see that display symptoms related to something like an internet addiction, there's an endpoint. So it's either about gaming or it's about porn or it's about gambling. Like those are the big three that I see. And the internet is the vehicle to deliver that. But at the end, the people are addicted to the sexual payoff or the gambling chase or the gaming. And a lot of times it's about the interaction-based gamings, right? So games where they get to interact with others, and that becomes that huge kind of payoff for them internally in their brain.
I'm just wondering because, I think I'm not even referring to those things. I'm sure those things are going to be a reality and already are. But for me personally, like just on a personal level, I'm like super sensitive to just energy and just myself. I know like my responses and reactions to things. And a day that I spend a lot more time on my computer or on my phone, I feel numb in a lot of ways. And I'm not as able to kind of like respond to normal things in my life. And my emotions seem a little more dull, or I might be like a little more like agitated when I spend a lot of time on my phone and like multitasking. But if technology weren't there and I was just multitasking in normal life, it's not the same. So, not in a psychological way at all, but that's just my experience. Like even something like that, like just spending too much time staring at a screen and like the effects that has on a very basic sense.
So yeah, and there is some research out there that talks about aggression actually goes up, which is what you're talking, like that irritability, hostility, or those things, and empathy goes down, which is probably what you're talking about with that numbness for you because you're such an empath.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's what happens. Yeah, you see it classically.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So we Sophie did something before we went on, and I feel like this conversation can go on for 3 hours.
Yes.
Because there's so much time. But Sophie put up something asking what questions her followers had
for you.
Okay.
For you. So actually, parents or individuals actually dealing with things, and I think maybe we can get to at least a couple of those because I feel like those would be really interesting.
Yeah,
questions.
They're all kind of similar. I think the first one is like technology, phone, screen time in general, iPad. What age do you think it's okay to
start introducing
I think
it?
Just introduce it. We'll start with that.
So part of it is, I think the listeners need to hear that it's not always going to be their choice because the industry comes in and puts it into schools and classrooms now, starting in about preschool, first grade, like kindergarten, where they're starting to put it in there. My opinion as an expert in dealing with families with this is, honestly, you have to create a buffer at home. So I think that it's great. I know that Dana told me that you guys don't do technology during the week for your boys. We do the same thing here. We do Tech-Free Tuesdays. That's good. This isn't on a Tuesday. So my kids are always so excited about
Taco Tuesday.
Taco Tuesday. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do tacos and no technology. But I think if users can like recognize that part that we talked about with the developing brain and how young kids are, they need a break and they need a buffer and they need connection. And so that's really what I would just implore parents to understand. It isn't as much about the technology or not. It's the attachment and the intimacy, emotional intimacy you have with your kids, and try to increase that at least at 50-50 or balance.
Yeah. So our kids go to a Waldorf school and they actually don't introduce technology at the school
at all.
I mean, probably until like junior high or something. I don't even know when they do it, but they're very anti. I mean, they're not supposed to have any of it at home at all. We introduced it at home for a couple of reasons. First of all, look, let's just be honest. It makes life easier for parents. That's why parents put TVs in kids' rooms early on. Our kids don't have a TV in their room. But that being said, not only do we limit it, but I also wanted them to have some place to get introduced to these sort of things because the world of work and everything else is also moving towards that. And I didn't want them to be completely isolated. I don't know what you think about that in terms of, are those skills they have to develop at the age of 8 and 7 years old, or is it okay to wait?
I think that it's, I love Waldorf, by the way. I've had families that I've had in. I think that this is a global economy that's going to rely on their ability to understand and interface technologically. and with VR and all of these things. There's a lot of different things I think the listeners need to recognize. I do not recommend VR with any child under the age of 13. Like anytime prepubescent, again, reality, fantasy, the confusion of the brain. And they actually literally, like at these organizations like Dave and Buster's and things like that, they're trying to get kids younger and younger to go into them. And that can be really, really devastating. But I do think like coding, understanding how systems work. I think that those code programs are really, really important. And again, it goes back to balance, right? Internet can be good. It's like food, right? Food is, we have to live on it, and it's sustainable. Sure. It's what keeps us. I'd love to have chocolate cake every day for breakfast. I love chocolate cake. I can't do that, right? It's not healthy.
Chocolate cake breakfast.
I wouldn't. I would never. I love chocolate, but I know myself, I could never start my day that way. I have to save it for the evening when I'm ready to numb out. That's when I can have my chocolate cake, I can have my ice cream, I can have all the sweets, because I know that I'm done and I don't have to provide any kind of energy anymore to the world and to the people in my life.
Well, that's the difference between being an adult and a child, right? It's like withholding that reward is
delayed gratification.
And kids don't know how to handle delayed gratification for a long time.
Well, and particularly now, right? Like if they get technology at like 4 or 5, 6 years of age, everything is instantaneous for them.
Hold on one second. I'm just going to see if there's anything else that we haven't hit that would be good.
Well, I mean, I think there are some important things here. When, we talked about kind of when to introduce it and the amount of time to spend and how we separate it out, et cetera. Do you think that there is good? We talked about coding. I think what's nice about coding is there's an educational component to it, but they're not tiny at that point, right? If they're coding, they're like 7 or 8 or at least 6 or something.
Right. 3rd, 4th grade.
Yeah. Do you think there is technology that you've found that actually is helpful? Like, are there things out there that parents can use to enhance that don't have these negative impacts?
It's tricky. I mean, I think that if you look at the science behind, say, My Baby Can Read or ABC Mouse or some of those programs that are like, quote unquote, educational for young children, the science shows that it creates delayed language acquisition. It creates delayed in educational opportunities for those kids. So the science doesn't support using those. However, those studies also didn't do it where a parent is interfacing with the technology with the child. Does that make sense? Like, so if a parent is sitting down and let's say you want to talk about cows and that they have 4 stomachs, and you pull up something online and you start showing your child, here's how a cow digests food compared to a person or whatever, and you're sitting there having that conversation with them, and you can actually graphically show them something that you've pre-vetted. That's a great opportunity to use technology with your child and educational in that place.
I think the really important takeaway from that is, look, initially parents loved using TV and things like that as a babysitter, right? You put your kids in front of the TV, they don't bother you anymore. It's like, we know if we're sitting downstairs with our friends and the kids are totally quiet upstairs, we know they turned on a device. We just go, wait, it's too quiet up there, and we go upstairs. That used to be a good thing, right? Like, I mean, the TV was the babysitter for a long time. What you're saying between the coding, between the interaction with the parents and the technology is, let's us not get lazy, right? It's on us as parents to not just say, well, look, I've had a tough day. I'm going to put my kids in front of the TV for 2 hours so that I don't have to worry about it. And then I'm going to make them food so they can eat it while watching TV, because I don't really want to deal with their noise and the drama that they're going to bring if I turn that TV off. And that's on us, right? As parents, that's not on them. They will, just like eating chocolate cake all day. I tell my kid this all the time, like our little one, Leo, he wants what he wants. He's 6 years old. He wants what he wants when he wants it. And he got really upset one time. He literally couldn't have a bar that Sophie wouldn't give it to him at the beginning of a flight. And he got really, really upset. And he said, but I want it. And I said, Leo, I totally get it. There are a lot of things you want. I said, do you want candy all the time? Yes. Do you want to be on TV all the time? Yes. Well, it's my job as a parent to make sure that you also eat other healthy food, because if you eat candy all the time, your teeth are going to rot. You're going to, gain weight. You're going to be diabetic. There are all these other things that are going to come out of this. And he kind of looked at me like, well, I'm still upset, but I don't really know what you're saying. And, I'm just going to give it.
It's not worth the lecture, Dad.
I know, right? But it's like, that's our job as parents, is not just to give our kids everything they want all the time. And that also means even if it makes our life easier, that's not necessarily the right decision.
And one more, I'll tell you, just to piggyback on that, my kids are 15 months apart, and my daughter, who's older, she'll come in, and they're 10 and 11 now, but like about 8, and my son was almost 7. She came in and he was watching a program, and they got like 30 minutes in the morning. It's real sports before fake sports. I have all these like silly rules. But she came in and she's like, you're over your 30 minutes. If you want to turn your brain to mush, that's up to you, but you know what technology does.
Yeah.
So, and it goes back to like, if we educate our kids and we give them the training and the education, they will make better choices. So keep lecturing.
Yeah. We say, what is it? Good for your brain?
Yeah.
Yeah. We say like, is this good for your brain? And then now they know. They're 6 and 8 almost. So
yeah, that's
awesome.
They try and sneak in stuff that's not good, but it's still like on the Disney Channel. So it can't be that bad, right?
Right.
Or, yeah, at least it's, again, I mean, you mentioned YouTube. Oh my God. I mean,
I can't even touch YouTube.
I don't let them touch it.
I get so disgusted because like you said, like you'll leave them with one little innocent thing that they're watching, like animals and, Arkansas, like out in the wild. And then all of a sudden they're watching like people open toys online. It's so scary. And that was before they could even read. That was before they even knew what they were doing. It was just so easy and so accessible to, take them to this whole other level.
Yeah.
So first of all, before we move on to the last part of this, I want to say, is there something we didn't cover that you feel like at the end of this, you want parents to know these facts? You want them to understand a specific piece of the puzzle so that we make sure that people walk out of here, being able to be more responsible?
There's so many things. I don't think that we talked as much as we needed to about pornography, and maybe that's another conversation of, average age is now 8 and chronic viewing for young boys is 11. And that goes back to like, boys that are going in and like, or kids that are going in and doing reports in 2nd and 3rd grade, and that the industry goes after, Meriwether Lewis and attaching some sort of ad into that because they know that that's what that age is doing. So that happened to my son at 8, and his response to me was, Mom, like they tried to trick me like you said they would. And I came over and we have ad blocker on, like I have all of these things on. I have no idea how it got through. And I came over and I was looking at it, and he said, how did she get here? And we did like a little prayer for her, and we talked about maybe she'd find her family again. And he didn't click on the ad. He went back to his report, and it was a healthy response. So one thing is for parents like that, I mean, that could be a whole segment talking about like just how ubiquitous and how challenging that area is.
I would actually love to do that at some point because, I mean, we have a lot in our relationship. We've worked through a lot of issues that are related to really early porn exposure. I mean, for me, it was 11 and completely changed the trajectory of sexuality for me.
Right.
But 8 years old, I mean, you don't even know what you're looking at.
No, and the devices that they have that they can buy, like I had a 9-year-old that had, bought a device on Amazon and divorced parents, and like one missed it. And anyway, so that is definitely something I think parents need to pay attention to. If you see kind of an altered reaction or the way that they're interacting with you, right? Something probably happened. And so that would be something that I would say would be important to kind of probably dive into. But mostly I think that it's for the listeners, it's be aware, to your point that you said, it's like, pay attention to your kids. We're parents. We're the ones that are supposed to be in charge, and they need us. And as much as they act like they don't, and it gets harder and harder the older they get, they do need us, and they need us to be stewards of this new technology revolution of where and how we interface into this world.
That's great. I think that's a good point. And we should absolutely schedule that one about sex and porn, because I think that's hugely important in this context of relationships. I think there's probably not a much more relevant topic for the impact on relationships than that exposure to porn, and how easy it's become now is just obscene.
Right. And it's not just, I mean, the kids are struggling with it. I mean, I look at adults, I look at like Ohio State coach, and, and then it's like his Amazon purchases are like publicly put out there. And it's terrifying, like to see what some of these people, and you look at them on the outside and you're like, what were you thinking? Right. And what were you doing? So, yeah.
Anthony Weiner. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We can go into long discussions. We will. We'll schedule another one. Okay. So we got 5 questions we ask everybody who comes on the podcast, and you're about to get in the hot seat. You ready?
Ready.
All right. Number 1.
What is the best advice you have ever received?
I would say from my grandmother who helped raise me. She said that always be kind to someone who doesn't deserve it.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. That's the first time we've ever had that one. What has been your proudest moment to date?
I think that probably the proudest moment I would say is seeing my children go out and be stewards in like a space that I didn't really anticipate, like being in this world, but like my kids standing up to their friends and telling them that they don't have to be the kid that posts online and they want them to come play. And just that makes me really proud to see just a shift in culture through my own children.
That's awesome. And the power they're probably going to have in other people's lives is they make it okay for them to not have to give in to all these things.
My fingers crossed.
Yeah. What has been your hardest moment?
I would say my hardest moment, it's had a lot of hard moments in my life. My hardest moment is probably coming through. I came from a very, very difficult background, homeless and challenged with a lot of like adversity in my life. And so like the hardest moment I would say to me is recognizing and realizing that no matter where you are, you've made it. And so it's ever evolving for me.
Yeah. And again, I mean, we can talk about this next time, perhaps, but also stopping every once in a while and looking and recognizing everything you've overcome, because it sounds like there's been a lot for you in your life.
Right.
To get you all the way to this place, which is amazing. So congratulations.
I love that. Just like you're here. You're already here.
Yeah.
This is it.
It's great. Today. Yeah.
Today, right now.
Yeah.
So coming from that kind of place of strife and difficulty, what is your self-care ritual? How do you take care of yourself to make sure you can do all these things, do all the work, raise your kids, be on podcasts like this? What's the self-care that you take for yourself?
So I always start every day before I like turn anything on or before my feet touch the ground. I do probably a 15 to 30 minute process where I take everybody in my life, family, kids, patients, and I just do I don't want to call it a meditation because it probably isn't, because I'm terrible at meditating. But it's all about like sending positive energy and love and like concern for them and care, because I feel like that lifted me through a lot. And then at the end of the night, I always go through a process of thankfulness and I go through a process of gratefulness. And I really try to focus on pulling that in, because in the world that we work in, it's a lot. You take on a lot of energy and negativity and pain. And so you've got to figure out how to be grateful for where you are and what you're able to do. So
I love it. And I think that follows up into our last question. The podcast is called Ignited. What is it that ignites you? What gets you going?
I love learning and I love teaching. So I think what excites me is being, in particularly around young kids and families, because I think that kids are incredible nowadays. And I think that if we empower them to be our leaders in our future, that's what excites me. I get very excited about that.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Dr. Lisa Strohman, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us these incredibly powerful and important tips to keep our kids safe and raise them in this changing world.
Yeah. And I think I feel actually empowered by this conversation. I thought I was going to be like distraught and a mess, but it's actually like, knowledge really is power, and knowing like what's out there, having that awareness. And I think it's, as a parent, really, really helpful. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for all the work that you do and all the work that you've been doing over the last couple of decades.
Go watch her TED Talk. We will put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put notes to all of this. Thank you so much again for joining us. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.